You are now listening to Abstract Thought. This is a podcast where creatives discuss their creative journey, all kinds of different things about their creative practice, etc. And today I'm sitting down with Dominic Senibaldi. How you doing, man?
Not too bad. How are you?
Chilling.
Awesome.
Welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I've been a fan of the stuff you've done with SquareCat, especially, and same with your miniature stuff you've been doing as of recently. So it's going to be interesting to talk about some of that stuff. And I guess before we jump in and kind of go through certain topics, if you can share with other people here who are listening, how they can hear or see or kind of watch anything about SquareCat, or just kind of watch updates of what you do, social media, etc.
Yeah. It's Cathead Press, by the way.
Oh, what did I say? SquareCat?
Yeah.
Oh,
We do print stuff for SquareCat, so it's a easy mistake to make.
Sorry about that. Yeah.
No worries. There's a lot of like cat themed places, like Alley Cat Ceramics.
I was just gonna say that
opened up too. So everybody's a cat lover, I suppose. But
cats are rad.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, my cat's trying to peek in on the Zoom meeting right now. Yeah. So as far as like my own work, I do have, like, obviously we have our Instagram for Cathead Press. So that's just Cathead Press Indie on Instagram, and that's predominantly where I'm posting stuff about projects we're doing, because we not only print, do commercial printing as far as t-shirts and, soft goods like that for local businesses and things. But, we work with artists. We, prior to the pandemic, we had a gallery that we ran, and we did artist events and things like that, workshops and everything. And we're kind of, starting to get back into some of those things. I'm actually working on launching a new workshop series, like screen printing workshops that people can take and stuff like that. So also, I keep saying we, but it's basically me. I'm like the only one that runs the joint at this point. So, but yeah, so you can find us just Cathead Press Indie on Instagram. And then my own work, as far as what I do for sort of my kind of artwork, I have an Instagram account called Dominics Small World. And that's all my like HO scale and like 1/25th scale miniatures that I've been working on. And then I also post some stuff on my personal account, which is Urban House Wizard. And I'll do some modeling stuff on there, but I do a lot of like my food stuff on that account. I'm not a huge Facebook person at this point. It's like, I don't know. There's like mostly if it wasn't for the like weird modeling groups that I'm on, I probably wouldn't be on Facebook, but it's sort of a necessary evil at this point. Yeah. And I do have to say, when I say modeling, I mean my like HO scale, like train modeling. I've told people in the past, they're like, what have you been doing recently? I was like, oh, I've been doing some modeling. And they're like, oh, like you're modeling, you're posing for drawings. And I'm no. Like, it's like HO scale, like small buildings. Think train sets, from when you were a kid kind of thing. So
that's funny.
Yeah. So I'm mostly on Instagram is where you can find a lot of the stuff I'm doing, both with Cathead and my own work and stuff like that. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at.
Awesome, man. Yeah, Facebook's a bit of a dumpster fire, so I dip in when I need very specific niche information on weird subcultures that have a forum I can join. But other than that,
exactly, yeah. And I'm part of a few of these modeling groups on Facebook, and they're weird places, man. Like, everybody's pretty cool in the main modeling group that I'm on. Everybody's really cool, and there's very kind of strict like page guidelines, no political stuff, because obviously, the modeling world it's sort of 50-50. It's sort of weird creatives, kind of people like me, and then it's a bunch of, aging boomer dudes, like kind of like weird gatekeeper people that get really uppity about what glue to use and what paint to use and stuff like that. So there's obviously some weird political things can sometimes sneak in.
Yeah.
But it's pretty quick to be removed by like the page admin and stuff, because it's like, none of us want to see that. We're trying to just talk about building tiny buildings.
Tiny buildings and which glue to use.
Yeah, exactly. So it's kind of a funny world to kind of get into. Yeah.
That's
Funny.
awesome, dude. This is kind of a question I've asked a few different guests, but I was wondering, since you've been into this like modeling realm, like in graffiti, there's a term for people who have just started painting graffiti and they don't know what they're doing. It's called being a toy. Like you're just being a little kid and like you don't know the right way to do stuff or the right way to use paint. So you're just playing with toys. And then I was talking to Dane Smith. He's a tattooer here in Indy. And he was telling me that people who do tattoos who are in that toy phase are called scratchers. Is there a term in modeling of people who like just got in, who don't know what they're doing? They're just slapping stuff together.
I haven't heard anything. I've heard like newbie like tossed around in some of the modeling groups, but that's kind of like an old term, I think. But people are actually, it's kind of interesting. People are rather generous with information in like the modeling realm. Because when I first started getting into it was right before COVID hit, and I went to Hobbytown, which is up by like Osaka and the Hooters, like off.
Is that in Castleton?
Yeah, it's like off of 86 or whatever up there, where what's that store, like only on weekends, or I can't remember what the name of that store is.
Yeah, I used to get HO scale trains from that store a long time ago.
Yeah, exactly. And so I just like rolled in there and I just bought a little plastic kit, like a little building. And I'd always loved trains since I was a kid. And, I was a Lego builder and, so I've just always been into building and stuff like that. So I just bought this kit and it was a brick, like a plastic brick kit. And I got it home. I was like, and I had like seen some stuff online and I was sort of like, how do they make it look like brick? It's plastic. And how do you paint it? How do you get the grout? I was like, am I going to have to take a tiny brush and just paint all the grout lines? So I ended up just going on YouTube and looking up how to paint, HO scale brick. And this account popped up that was Jason Jensen Trains. And he is this amazing modeler. And he's probably just a little bit older than me. So he's probably like early 40s. And he's actually an old, I'd say old, he's not old, but he used to be like a comic artist. And he did like Witchblade, I think was the comic he worked on. And he does like high profile miniature commissions for architecture firms and things like that. But he has a whole like HO scale layout he's been working on. And he has this awesome YouTube channel. And we're connected on Facebook and Instagram now. And we talk and, I shoot him messages and he's just like super generous and super awesome. He's kind of like this Bob Ross sort of style character in the modeling world. So, but yeah, I don't know what my point was, but people have been like pretty like generous with information. So it's been kind of an approachable medium to sort of get into, I think, for me anyways.
Yeah, that's super cool. I imagine it's a very like, considering it's such a niche type of thing, like, once people get into it, it's kind of like people have just been waiting to tell other people the certain glue that they use that does,
totally.
It's like magic. So like they see somebody maybe struggling, they're like, dude, I found this thing out, you got to try it, et cetera, et cetera.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, it's like, people ask questions on some of the forums and stuff, and I've only been doing it for like 2 years. And I'm ready with, 50 recommendations that like, 50 other people have already recommended. Everybody wants to kind of get their like, say their piece, about the best whatever to use, so it's a funny sort of realm to get into.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah.
You touched on earlier, you said that you've always been kind of interested in, building and trains, et cetera. What is your kind of background like? I think I did a little bit of research about you. Are you from Indy originally? Or are you from the West Coast, or what's a little bit of your backstory?
I'm from the West Coast. So I grew up in Washington State. So I grew up in Eastern Washington, in Spokane, which is, I don't know, 40 minutes from the Idaho border if you just go east. So it's eastern Washington. Everybody sort of thinks all of Washington is Seattle. And it's like, no, about 75% of the state is east of the mountains. So it's high desert. It's 100 degrees in the summer, 4 feet of snow in the winter. It's not just constant rain like, Seattle or whatever. So that's where I grew up. And then I moved to the west side of the state after high school and bummed around in Seattle for a couple of years. And then started going to college in Aberdeen, Washington, which is Kurt Cobain's hometown. And that's where I met my partner. And that's where I got sort of back into art. Prior to that, when I first started college, I was about 21 when I started going to college. So I took a bit of a break after high school. And when I was in high school, I was into engineering, architecture, and chemistry. And so that's kind of where, my building was kind of going, in architecture class where I was making models and out of like foam core and stuff like that. So, but I'd always been, drawing and painting and, stuff like that as a kid. And so when I started going back to college, I just took an art class and just got like fully immersed back into the art world. And so I got my AA degree at a community college, majored in art, and then I went to Western Washington University in Bellingham. That's where I got into printmaking, really. So I started doing lithography and etching, screen printing, stuff like that. And then
what was your take on screen printing coming from doing some of this like building and engineering background?
It was, I think the reason, any print medium, whether it's screen printing, lithography, etching, it's all so heavily process based. And there's a lot of, obviously with etching and lithography, there's a lot of chemistry involved. So I think there was something in the process aspect of it that resonated with what I was into prior to that. And so, yeah, especially with lithography, which I kind of predominantly focused on all throughout undergrad and graduate school. I didn't like fully get immersed into printmaking into screen printing till the last little bit I was in Chicago. And then really when I was at Heron for graduate school is when I really kind of got into screen printing a lot. But there was something about...
Is that what brought you to Indy, the graduate program?
Yeah, so after I finished at Western, I applied to graduate school at SIC in Chicago and didn't get in, but they still wanted my money, obviously. So they were like, "Oh, you can come do a post-bac program." And I was like, "All right." Like, I was in my early 20s. I didn't understand the cost of college, but it was an invaluable experience. I really learned a lot. And especially just kind of moving that far away from my home state into a city like Chicago, it just sort of like opened my mind to so much stuff. And I really just learned a lot about being an artist in a city and how to like work with other artists and meet new artists and do shows and write about my work. So there was a lot of good stuff, even though the price tag of that college was pretty hefty. But after I did 2 years there is when I applied to a bunch of grad schools, and I got into 3 or 4. And I ended up choosing Heron, one because of its proximity, and then just because of its printmaking history. So that's why I came down here, and that was like 2011 is when I moved to Indy. Graduated 2013, and then I started teaching at Heron right out of grad school. So I was at Heron teaching, and I was also, after a while, I got hired as the shop tech for the printmaking department. And I officially kind of left. Well, I left that position in 2019, I believe. And then I was still adjuncting, and then COVID hit.
Thanks.
So, but I had started opening Cathead in like 2016. And so when I
was
left
this just a side project at the time?
Yeah, it was like we kind of started like hashing it out in 2015, and then officially opened Cathead Press in 2016. And then just kind of did it as a side project for a few years until finally it got to a point where I could do it sort of full time, and that's when I left my full-time employment at Heron.
How was that transition?
It was weird. It was giving up something very arduous and kind of soul crushing, working as a staff member at a academic institution for something more fulfilling and freeing, yet extremely unstable as far as income goes. So it was definitely, there's a lot of stress, and it's still something I'm kind of struggling with at this point, because it's essentially, I'm running a small business, and it's really hard if you don't have, I don't know, $250,000 in the bank or something like that. So yeah, it's been a wild ride for sure, but it's fun. I mean, it's a blast, but I don't know, it's a give and take, with both things. So
Definitely, man. Absolutely. What were your early years kind of after grad school like? Like, what type of stuff were you screen printing, or what did your art sort of look like at that time?
Yeah, at that point, since I hadn't, since I got hired on right away to teach at Heron, I still had access to the print lab there, which was great because I was still able to make, lithographs. I could use those facilities to make my work. And then as the years went by, I ended up getting a studio at the Harrison Center, and that was somewhere around 2014. And since I was in that studio more, my focus shifted from prints more to just drawings. So I was just doing a lot of graphite drawings, but still kind of the 2D realm. And I started getting a little bit more into sculpture, just like small sculptural objects that had sort of drawing or print elements to them, but still predominantly kind of working in 2D artwork. And my drawings they sort of evolved from my prints. They were very similar because a lot of the prints I was doing were lithographs, which are essentially drawings. You're drawing on a stone and then pulling prints from that drawing. So it's very similar in a way. It's just with a litho, you can make 100 instead of just one drawing. So, but yeah, it's still kind of just like working in that 2D realm. But yeah, and then as soon as I started doing Cathead, and kind of started doing that full time, my work shifted a lot more from actually making just to managing like an arts business, or / organization. So I ended up leaving my studio because I just wasn't making work anymore, because I couldn't really serve more than one master at the time. And then I started doing print jobs for people. I had friends, even though we didn't open Cathead at first with the intent of it being a commercial screen printing shop, I was getting friends of mine all the time being like, hey, can you print me 20 shirts? Can you do this? And I was like, I don't really know how to print shirts, but I'll try, And so I started doing these little jobs for people. And I was like, oh, well, this could be a way to kind of generate some income to sustain the business and some of the work we want to do with trying to pay artists for stuff and things like that. So it just kind of took off from there. And now I just basically print stuff for other people. That's my printmaking thing. And that's kind of how I got into the modeling, was needing something that wasn't related
Right.
to that kind of realm, So yeah.
Yeah, it's parallels some of my work in advertising. I was a graphic designer for advertising agency out of school, and I was definitely seeking something else that was more, I don't know, creatively fulfilling. And it's definitely a bit of a struggle trying to make money doing that thing that you're trying to do creatively.
Totally.
There's something about just painting for the sake of painting, or creating just from the sake of creating, that's a little bit more pure, and you feel like you can just kind of do whatever you want and there's no pressure behind it. What are your takes on the modeling stuff? I mean, you're putting a tremendous amount of time into it and craft. And that being said, there seems to be some sort of innate value that comes with putting these things together. Do you sell some of the models that you've created, or
Yeah.
what are your thoughts on that whole kind of selling them or keeping them or just doing it as a hobby?
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting thing to think about, because when I first started doing it and sharing images of it, people were like, "Oh my gosh, these are so amazing!" And I'm like, "Yeah, I don't know. I just like took to it instantly, and really just kind of got into this, making these buildings look old and all this like layering, and it was very painterly. And I was getting a lot of people asking, "Oh, are you going to sell these? Are you going to show these?" And I sort of initially had that attitude of, I have a hard time with the term hobby and like hobbyist in some contexts, because I don't know. In some ways, I think it's a devaluing term unless we can sort of re-establish the term hobby or craft as like something, it is worth more than I think what people think. But
Definitely.
anyway, but my point is that a lot of people were asking, "Oh, are you going to sell these? Are you going to show them?" And I was like, I don't know. Like, I'm not looking to monetize this hobby,
Yeah.
for lack of a better word. It's like my partner, they garden a lot, and I'm guilty of being like, "Hey, we should try to sell some of these vegetables." And she's just like, I don't want to monetize. I just do this for joy and to feed ourselves, and she's like, "I don't want to like monetize this," so it's kind of the same how I felt about the modeling thing is I wasn't going into it with an intent of it being sort of a hustle or like a side hustle of like, "Oh, I could show these or sell them or whatever." But I think things change and evolve, and now I'm sort of like, well, maybe I could, do some sort of offshoot, modeling kind of exhibition. Maybe I just, paint a bunch of doors and they're mounted on a wall. So I'm starting to kind of like think about these more conceptual ideas that I could use some of the skills and techniques I've been kind of honing with the craft for something that I could show people in that sort of context. So I think I didn't go into it with that intent, but I think it's starting now to sort of evolve naturally kind of into that area, which I think is a little bit more healthy than approaching it from, well, I gotta make something off of this kind of idea, so.
Yeah, definitely. And if it's anything like Cathead, you probably started Cathead like, oh yeah, it'd be pretty cool to maybe like do something with my friends. If they want to make something cool, they could just pop in and do something. And all of a sudden you're like, I don't even make art anymore. And I'm just having to do
Yeah,
production. And, so you're probably looking at the things that you like to do, from a very pure standpoint. You're like, I'm going to let that
exactly.
chill for a little bit before I invest too much.
Yeah, because it kind of changes the motivation for it, and it's like, I don't want everything to be capitalism.
Right.
It's like I just want to enjoy the process and the making of it, and like you said, it's the kind of like pure state of just sort of creating. Um, yeah, so that's kind of been where I've been at with it for a
That's,
while.
that's beautiful, man. I don't think there's anything wrong with that at all. Yeah, just being able to make and have no pressure behind it. Like, I mean, in a weird way, I kind of started my art and mural practice sort of like that, and then it sort of evolved into, well, if I want to paint a building, that's kind of costly, so I have to
Right.
have people pay for, the paint and the supplies and the lift or whatever's involved. So, it's definitely grown into a different beast than I had originally, but I don't know. I just have to be real careful about things I take on and things I say yes to. If I'm
Hmm.
if I'm really like struggling for money, maybe I'll say yes to something that otherwise I wouldn't. But yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong with just doing something that you purely enjoy and your skill and your craft and your level of expertise. I think that's
Totally.
awesome, man. And
And
I
that's
mean, it rings through in the work too. I mean, I can definitely tell like you just having fun and enjoying what you're doing.
totally, I appreciate that. Yeah, it's a blast. It's really fun, and yeah, that's kind of an interesting thing, because it's sort of, I think that's one of the hardest things as artists, to learn, just because of the way the arts are centered in how our economy works and what it's like assess like cultural value of what the arts are. I think it's really hard for artists to learn when to say no, because we're taught we should say yes to everything, even if it's not emotionally or monetarily beneficial to us, because we are sort of, there's this cultural idea that, well, you just doing the work is fulfillment enough, so I think that gets tough when you're trying to make a living off of artwork, when to say no, because there can be projects that just they're not going to be good for your mental health or your physical health or your finances, but we're like, but I gotta say yes because someone asked me, and if I say no, then I'm not going to get any more jobs. It's kind of like this weird game that we're kind of forced to play as artists. So it's a weird gig.
Yes, it definitely is pretty bizarre, and it gets even weirder when the stuff you really don't want to do, you can make a lot of money doing,
Right.
So that's the slippery slope of like, do I want to dance with the devil in that sense and
Exactly.
stack my pockets for a little bit? I mean, if I really wanted to make some solid money, I would not be doing what I'm doing right now,
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah,
but
for sure.
I think with screen printing and printmaking, there's if you're printing things commercially, that takes a lot of pressure off of you as a creative and as an artist. You're just doing process and production and getting things out the door, which is probably, fulfilling in the sense that you don't have that pressure at all, right?
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. Especially, I think I've tried to kind of position Cathead in a unique place that I don't focus, not now anyways. I think I'm trying to kind of like, work this out, but right now we don't really focus on in-house design work because it's a whole nother level of the aspect. And I'd rather showcase other artists and designers in the city. And so when someone comes to us, they're like, I need a design, because a lot of people that come to me with print jobs, they already have design. And probably 75% of the time it's someone I know, because, I've worked with Flatland, I've worked with Guide and Anchor, I've worked with tons of artists and designers in the city, Bootleg Sign Co. And half the time someone comes to me with a job, they're like, oh, Flatland designed this for us. And we, they said you could do the printing and stuff. So that's pretty cool. But when someone needs a design, I'm like, well, what's your aesthetic? And they describe something like, well, you go to Bootleg or you go to Flatland or Guide and Anchor, those are just a few examples. But so I think that kind of puts us in a unique place, but it also does kind of take that pressure off of me because I'm not having to also produce design work. We can just focus on the production of the items and things like that. So yeah, so that definitely helps with, because I'm basically a 1.5 person operation and it's me kind of running everything, and then I pay a person that helps me. She's in the shop with me like 90% of the time, and she does a lot of the printing and production work, and I'm doing sort of the back end management and producing films and getting files ready and shooting screens and all that kind of stuff. So, but yeah, I mean, it's a lot for like 1.5 people.
Yeah, seriously. This is kind of going back to the Heron days, but I was a VCD major at Heron, and for a couple of my electives, I took a couple interesting classes, and for some reason, I can't for the life of me recall why I never took screen printing. It's not that I didn't like it. I think I just honestly didn't know enough about it. There were definitely kids in my grade that were, screen printing was like a goal that they wanted to take a class like that at Heron. And I didn't do any of it in high school and really didn't know too much about it. So, maybe if someone's listening to this podcast and they're like, hey, I don't really know anything about screen printing, how does one get into that? Or what sort of things can people look up that they could learn about screen printing? Or, I don't know. I guess if you could talk to a previous version of myself who's on the fence of maybe taking a class or getting into this, what is something you'd say to them?
Yeah, I mean, I think as far as screen printing goes, I think it's one of the most direct applications of design work sort of into the real realm that there is, especially with the way design is now as a digital medium, and sort of a lot of it only existing in the digital realm. Designers working now, they're designing for websites, Instagram, kind of that whole realm. So I think it's one of the most easily accessible ways to realize a design in the physical world outside of just a digital print from an Epson printer or something like that. So I think that's where it has a lot of interest and application to the design realm. It's a way that you can put your image on a tote bag that also utilizes another handmade sort of craft in a way, because I mean, you could easily digitally print an image on a tote bag or a t-shirt. There's ways to do that, but I think it utilizes a handmade kind of process to realize those designs. So yeah, I think that's where there's a lot of crossover, and printmaking in general has that multiple sort of concept ingrained into it, where you can produce an image over and over and over and over and over again, on 100 items or something like that. So I think that's where it's a way that a design can be disseminated into the physical world. So I don't know. That's kind of what the sort of idea I've always tried to convey about why printmaking and screen printing can be important for designers.
Definitely.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, 100%. That's something I really missed out on. I wish I had another available elective when I was at Heron. I probably would have taken a screen printing class, but I maxed out on my credits doing other BS. But
when were you at Heron?
I graduated 2017, I think.
Okay, well, I would have still been teaching there.
Were you teaching screen printing there?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I usually taught at least one screen printing class a semester.
Nice. I think my homie Alex had you as a professor. Alex Sanchez.
Oh yeah, I mean, he's a studio artist at Cathead. So
nice.
He does a lot.
I think he's printed a few of my shirts there.
Yeah. He's designed a lot of stuff for me. He's one of the people that when a client comes to us and they need a design, I'll kick him to Alex, because he can like basically design anything. He can design something weird and foo-foo. He can design something very clean and corporate, so he's a great designer.
Definitely.
And yeah, I taught him screen printing, so that's kind of funny.
Yeah, that's hilarious. I've always kind of, had my toes in maybe taking a screen printing class, or I honestly think it'd be cool. And I think I maybe even DM'd you. I'd just be curious to go to Cathead Press one day and just kind of watch and just see some of the stuff that's being printed and just kind of observe some of the process, because I think that's partially the reason I haven't really dipped into it, is I know process is key, and there's definitely a certain right and wrong way to do things. And correct inks to use, or the way that you layer stuff is important in terms of how it's going to look in the final, the final composition, etc. But me being a designer and just a creative, sometimes I like to kind of do cursory research just to see, okay, here's what the standard process is. If you want to print something using lithography or whatever to, I don't even know the right words I'm using here,
right.
But basically, like, what's the standard process to do the job properly? And then what kind of cool, fun, creative stuff can you do when you flip those rules, or you do the rules in the wrong order or something? And what kind of creative things can you have that come out of that? I guess is something that's kind of my approach to art in general. But I guess to tangent on that, are there new inks being created, or like what's the future of printmaking and screen printing kind of like, or what sort of things are kind of evolving or people are doing?
I'm always trying to do research. I do a lot of research, mostly because I didn't ever train as a commercial screen printer. When I first opened Cathead, the commercial printing side in like 2019, I was like, I'm going to use this new line of water-based inks, and they're non-plastisol and they're great. And it turned out they sucked. And I started using plastisol inks. But plastisol inks have come a long way. They're like phthalate free now. They're not as toxic. But even just with general screen printing, like fine art screen printing, the technology's changed a lot. A lot of the chemicals used now are non-toxic. They're water soluble. There's still like when I would teach at Heron, because we have to coat the screens with a photosensitive emulsion that you like shoot the image on, that then like you wash out so that the ink can get pushed through the open areas. And then all the inks, the inks you'd use for paper, like acrylic based, they're Speedball acrylic based ink. So they're basically like acrylic paint. They're not as plasticky. They have a different acrylic binder than like golden acrylic paint. So they have a different like flow to them and viscosity. But anyway, yeah. So that technology has come a long way, because in the 60s, all these like old dudes were using oil-based enamel screen printing inks that they were, and then they'd wash them out with mineral spirits and shoot it with a power washer, and it aerosol like mineral spirits into the air, and they breathe it in. So, but it's funny because, I'd be teaching screen printing and I'd be like, yeah, this emulsion, it's water soluble. It's not really going to hurt your hands. This ink is fine, but it's not really stuff you want to send down the drain in Indianapolis that just goes into the White River. I was like, it's, it is what it is, what are you going to do, kind of thing. But I forgot what my point was, but yeah. So, the technology has definitely come a long way as far as like toxicity and accessibility to the materials. It's a lot easier to get stuff. I mean, you can get everything you need to like do home screen printing on like blick.com, so it's definitely come a long way. And yeah, so I had to do a lot of research when we first started doing the commercial printing, because I was doing it for a couple of years before we really like launched the commercial printing side of things. But I'm still learning stuff, because it's, like I said, it's not something I trained to do. And I mean, we pull great prints, on shirts and whatever, but yeah, it's definitely like still a learning process, so I don't know. It's kind of wild. There's tons of like different technology and chemicals and inks and all that sort of stuff. So it's pretty crazy.
That's super cool, man. Is there any crossover between, your etching, screen printing, printmaking background in the model stuff? Like, I imagine there's probably some, like, let's say maybe trying to get a logo or something on the side of a building, or,
Totally. Yeah. I think a big part is like, and this doesn't like super relate to like printmaking as a process, but but it does in just the execution of imagery and prints. But the sort of like color theory plays a huge part in the modeling, because when you're doing something on that scale and you have, three little buildings sort of lined up next to each other, it's different than seeing buildings in real life, because they're so small and they're right next to each other. The color of each building, plays a part in how they look together. So color theory is a huge part of the modeling. And then even, I'm doing the wall one color and the trim a different color, and trying to like figure out what colors look together and how they interact and things like that. So and that's a huge part of printmaking, even, screen printing a shirt, like what colors are going to look good next to each other? What color is going to look good on, if someone wants a purple shirt, like the shirt to be purple, and their print is, some weird color, like you have to think about simultaneous contrast and like how those colors interact with each other, how the chroma of the ink is going to interact with the like fabric and things like that. So I think there's a lot of stuff like that definitely like has crossed over to the modeling, just thinking about those kind of things. It's pretty interesting.
Yeah, that's super interesting, man. I was going to ask, given that you're from Washington State, is there any influence that you carry over into your either art or printmaking or even modeling of sort of your childhood growing up out there? Or, how does that have any effect on your artwork to this day?
I mean, probably part of when I was growing up, my parents, we had the Spokane Art School in my hometown, which is essentially the same thing as like the art center here. So it was like a community art class school that anyone could just take like art classes and stuff like that. So my parents were enrolling me in those classes from when I was like, I don't know, 6 till I was maybe 12 or 13. And so I took tons of art classes. And one of the repeat classes I was always taking was these ceramics classes. And there was something about ceramics that I feel like there's a slight crossover to printmaking, because in ceramics, if you're doing sort of production ceramics, even like handmade, there's a multiple aspect to it. You know, a lot of the ceramicists I know here in town, they're going to make 30 mugs that are all like kind of the similar mug, you know, to have a stock of mugs to sell. So I think there was something learning that initial how ceramics worked that kind of crossed over into printmaking. But even just, you know, being immersed in art studios that early, I think, influenced my sort of knowledge of, you know, what an art space could be and like how it functions, you know, even being a child or a kid and kind of experiencing that, I think, influenced my desire to open up an art space, I think. So I mean, it sounds kind of cheesy, but but you know, I think that's, you know, an influence for sure.
Yeah, that's super cool. No, that makes a lot of sense. Did you have any, let's say, artists in the family or creatives in the family, or you know,
Mm-hmm.
maybe a mentor either through school or something that you kind of, you know, really pushed you along or gave you that extra boost you needed?
For sure. Yeah, I mean, I think just as a child, you know, my father's a jazz musician. He's a drummer. So I was always around music and around musicians. They were always, you know, practicing in our house and stuff like that. Because I'm also a musician, drummer, and guitarist. And then my mom, you know, she was always an artist. She owned a stained glass shop for a while when I was a kid, and she did rug repair, like Oriental rug repair, and worked in other stained glass shops. And then my sister is a wonderful artist. So art was always kind of part of I mean, that's kind of sounds like a line. A lot of people say like art was always around, you know, kind of thing. But I mean, it really was, you know, I was just always surrounded by creativity. And so my parents, you know, always encouraged art, even in the kind of like growing up in the 90s, you know, feeling like you had to go to college, you know, to get a career. Even with that kind of always looming, they were always very supportive of being creative and stuff like that. But I think I really didn't like get an idea that I wanted to be fully immersed in the arts till I went to community college in Washington, and I was like 21, and I took that sort of first art class. And my professor, he was a family friend now. He was the father of my now partner's like childhood friend. So like she knew who he was, and she's like, when we started dating, she's like, "Oh, you should take a class from Eric. You'll love it." And I was like, "Okay," you know. So I took this art class, and it just like blew me away. And I was like already, you know, very, you know, I was a good student. I wanted to be good, and so I was just, you know, fully immersed in, you know. And I took design from him, painting. He was a part of this kind of the art department at the community college. It was basically like a one-person art department. So, and he went to Yale and Cornell for both painting and printmaking. And his father was a pretty well-known plein air painter in like the Oregon, Washington area, kind of part of like the Emily Carr School and stuff like that. So he was very kind of like that old school artist, but he knew like printmaking, he knew painting, design. And I just took as many classes as I could. And he turned out to be, you know, a mentor, and he's still a family friend. And seeing what he did is kind of, even though I've like completely changed what I wanted to do and where I wanted to go with being in kind of the art world, seeing what he did made me want to continue the arts, because I saw him as a practicing artist, making work, showing work in galleries, teaching, being like a full-time tenured faculty member at a college. And I was like, this is what I want. I want to like go to grad school for art and become a teacher and show work and stuff like that. So I think that's kind of like what really put me on that path, even though it's like completely changed. I'm like completely anti-academia at this point, and completely doing something different. But I mean, that still like is part of what I've done, and it's kind of part of my journey through the arts. So
Heck yeah. Yeah, those people are super important. I'd not heard of a program where the professor's teaching multiple disciplines. That's super neat. Was it all like a homeroom type of class structure, or was it just you can schedule different classes with that person and they can teach that at different times?
Yeah, so it was like the art department had maybe 2 or 3 different classrooms. There was like a main room that had a bunch of tables that he taught design in, and then it had this other area where it had presses. So that's where he taught printmaking and painting. And then it had another room that was like drawing horses, and that's where we did like figure drawing and stuff like that. But it was structured like any other college. Like you signed up for drawing one, he like designed the whole curriculum. So there was a drawing sequence. There was, so it was like drawing 1, 2, and 3. There was a design sequence. So you took like design 1, design 2. There was an intro to printmaking. There was a painting sequence. So it was painting 1, painting 2, painting 3, and they were all separate classes. So it was structured like any other, sort of art school. It was just all taught by the same guy.
That's awesome, man. That's
so
really
he was
cool.
a busy dude.
Yeah, he sounds like it. I don't know how he had the time to do gallery stuff and teach all those disciplines.
He was pretty prolific. So
that's probably inspiring to see.
Yeah, I actually got offered that job. So it was the only time I've been offered a tenure track position, and it was when he was retiring, and it was in 2018, and so he was retiring. He was like, "Hey, I'm finally retiring, and you should apply for this job." And I was like, "Okay," but I had just like left my full-time job at Heron, or I might have still been doing it, but it was like kind of right when I solidified Cathead as like a full-time thing. And then my partner and I, we just bought our house here in Indy. And then because we bought our house, I had just moved my parents here from Washington.
Wow.
And like, they bought a house here. And so I was like, this is like the worst time for you to retire. Like you should have done this 5 years ago. But I wouldn't have had the experience to get that job. So, he was like, well, even if you don't want it or you don't take it, you should still kind of just do it just to kind of, go through the motions. I was like, all right. So I applied, flew to Washington, did the interviews. I met with the president of the college, the vice president of the college. I met with the hiring committee. And then like 2 days later, the head of the hiring committee called me. She's like, we want to offer you the job. And I was like, okay, well, when do you need an answer? And she was like, right now, like on the phone. And I was like, I can't do that. Sorry. So I was like, can I call you tomorrow? Can I have a day? She's like, okay. And then I emailed her like 24 hours later. I was like, I can't take this job. I'm sorry.
Dang.
But yeah, so that was kind of a wild experience. But yeah, that was the only time I've ever been like offered a full-time tenure track position. And I just like, I don't think I have the stomach for the academic world anymore. I still teach. I teach online at Ivy Tech. I teach art history, and that's great, but it's just like, I don't know if I could do it in that capacity.
Why so? Just out of curiosity.
I think just the way it's such
Is that just too big of a bag to open?
Yeah, it's a whole nother podcast. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I think it's just there's so many issues of the cost of college, the way academia is run, the tenure system. There's just as much worker exploitation in academia as there is in any other like industry in the country. The way that they basically mostly rely on adjuncts, underpaid, overworked adjuncts to keep the colleges running. Yeah, so I don't know. It's just
one
a
of those
whole,
things. The people at the bottom doing the most work get paid the least, and the people at the top do the least work and get paid the most.
exactly, and it's hard now. It's hard for me to justify to young students like going to college with the price tag. I'm just like, I have $142,000 in student loan debt. I'm just like, I can't. It's hard for me to justify like doing that to anybody else. So I don't know. Like I said, it's a whole other bag.
Definitely. With teaching, and kind of the only reason I'm asking this question, I had one of my graphic design professors, after we finished our courses, we went out for we went to a brewery or something as the last kind of, oh, college, hurrah, you guys passed your classes, etc. And when I was at at this dinner, one of my professors came up to me and she was just like, Nick, you are going to be a professor one day. I can just tell, and I can tell it's in your blood. And I'm just like, dude, I don't know, man. I've heard so many things. I've heard a lot of great things too. And yeah. I like being able to help people along their journey. And even if I don't know their journey, just kind of, I don't know, being a voice to help people kind of push for themselves and kind of grow. Do you have, maybe a moment as a teacher or as a professor that really stands out as like, I don't know, just something really cool that a student was able to do, or that you worked with a student on that you're really proud of, or, what are the good parts of teaching, I guess, that made it worth it?
Yeah. I mean, I think one, and it's obviously kind of a cheesy thing, but like seeing a student be excited, like really get excited about, whether it's printmaking or painting or something like that, I think is very fulfilling. Just seeing that excitement. But I think in the printmaking side of things, when I've taught print, whether it's screen printing or litho, when a student like gets the image, when they like make the image and it's like the image and they're like, I did it. Like I made this perfect print, not perfect, like, polished wise, but like the image works, colors right, the layers are right, the design's right. That's really cool. That's a cool moment. And they're like excited about it. They're like, I made this awesome print. Like I did it. And I'm just like, you nailed it. When I can say you nailed it to a student, like that's great, because I had teachers say that to me, like in Chicago, they're like, you nailed it, like in a critique or something like that. And I'm like, that's a really cool feeling when a student nails it. I think.
Yeah, as a creative, you need that little push every once in a while to be like, am I on the right path here? Am I doing it properly?
And just hearing someone say, yeah, you fucking nailed it, it's great, so, and I love teaching, I love teaching students. I love teaching the process of printmaking. And I think that's why, Cathead is still a great thing for me, because I can still do that, but it's in a different environment. The academic world, it's half and half to me, and some people really have the disposition and the stomach for it. And they can just like, they can do it for the sake of teaching the students. And it's like, for me, I kind of had to reconcile this. And I just had to admit to myself that I'm not built for it. I'm not wired for the academic, like teaching environment in that capacity. I can't do it. I can't get past all the other like bullshit that's part of academia. Like I can't look past it. Some people can. So I think there's definitely other environments that don't have that extra layer. I taught at the art center for a while, and that was a different environment, because people were there. They weren't there pursuing a degree, and they weren't there because they thought they had to be there to be able to get a job at some point. So it was a different motivation for learning a craft or a process or something like that. So,
and you could tell an immediate difference in kind of the approach of the people taking the course with that mindset.
Sure. Yeah, really? For sure. Yeah. And that's not to say that like every student in academia in a academic school setting is like just slogging along. There's beautiful students and students doing great work, but it's a hard thing for me to get past. It's a different environment. I don't know. It's not bad or good. It's just different, and it's something that I came to realize I wasn't super wired for.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And it takes maybe some hard years to come to that, realization, or, look yourself in the face and be like, yeah, maybe this isn't really the path that I'm trying to go down. It's probably a scary thing to kind of admit and pursue something different. But,
Totally. Yeah.
I've definitely heard in Indianapolis, I've heard people rant and rave about Cat Head all the time, and, the stuff that you guys do there, and the different jobs that people have. Alex has ranted and raved about it. He loves Cat Head and said you're a super helpful dude. And I think that's awesome, man. I mean, regardless of the tenure track, et cetera, just being there to assist people with process and some of the stuff. Cause like, whether you go to college or not, there's still going to be like a correct way to do something that, somebody could make mistakes for years and years and not even know that they're making a mistake. It takes someone who's had some experience to, even offer in a, let's say a paid space, someone's paying to go there to make stuff, but still the people who run the space know what they're doing. And
Totally.
that thus has inherent value, right?
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's a great point. I mean, that's kind of where I evolved as, if you want to call it, as like a teacher, but I just want to like help people do what they want to do. And I mean, that's injected into every part of my life. I mean, years ago, one of my friends was getting married and she made an Instagram post. It was like, we need a big pot of chili. And I was like, I'll make you a big pot of chili. Because if I can, I want to help people like realize what they want to do, And so that's what I loved about teaching when I was teaching at Heron, when I would teach the senior classes, like the senior printmaking classes, because they already had the process down, but they were just trying to like realize projects. And that's what I really loved, was be like, oh, like workshopping, sort of what's the best way to get this idea on a piece of paper or in a sculpture and we just like would workshop these ideas. And that's what I really found fun. And that's what I still do with Cathead, with some of the artists that rent studios or the keyholder members are like, hey, I need to do this thing. How do I do it? I'm like, I don't know. Let's figure it out, kind of thing. So I think that's really what I still enjoy about that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's super cool, man. I definitely need to dive in and try to do some printmaking, or,
Totally.
I need to try to do it, but I feel like I would have to read like or even just be in the class for like an idiot's guide to,
right.
X or Y or.
Well, we're launching this new series of workshops. A local artist is going to be teaching them. So maybe you can take one of those, or even like, let's print some of your designs on some shirts and you can come check out the process. And
that'd be crazy.
We'll just do it that way,
Yeah, I had Alex print me a t-shirt, and I had him do white ink on a black garment. And he was just like, dude, this ink is going to be interesting nonetheless.
It's going to look gray.
He did. It took him a few tries, but the final version is pretty neon looking. It's pretty neat.
Nice. That's awesome. Yeah, it's tough. That was one thing I had to learn about screen printing, was like printing on dark fabric. I'm surprised I don't charge a premium for like white on black. Like, it seems like it's simple, but it's way more difficult than if I was printing 3 colors on a white shirt or something. Just printing a single layer of black or white on a black shirt is twice as hard.
Why is that? Is it just because the ink doesn't have enough, I don't know, gusto? I don't know.
Yeah, the inks aren't as opaque as you'd think. And so if you're printing white plastisol ink on a black shirt, you'll have to print it once while it's on the press. And then while it's still on the press, you'll have to flash dry it. So you're not fully curing it, but you're just putting a flash dryer over it to kind of get it dried a little bit or cured a little bit. and then you got to print another layer of that white like right on top of it. And so obviously your shirt can't move, so you need to have your proper like platen set up and things like that. So I mean, it takes you twice as long because you're basically, even if it's a single layer, if it's just white on black, it's one color, but you're pulling it twice as many times. So it can get a little bit more complex. And then if you don't actually cure it right, the ink layer is so much thicker that if you don't cure it fully, it'll like wash out in the wash. It'll like chip off. It won't like stretch right. So it's white on black is a tough tough print, but they're the coolest looking shirts. So it's like, you know, supposed to do. So
yeah, it's interesting. You're basically applying like primer to it first and then painting over the primer.
Well, and then even if, you know, if I have a t-shirt that's on a black shirt, and let's say it's a 3-color shirt, and we'll just say it's like red, yellow, blue, you know, 3 elements of a singular design, it would technically be a 4-layer print because I'd have to pull a white base layer that's all of those colors as just a single layer white, flash that, and then I have to print each color on top of that white base so it actually shows up on the black. And there's other ways you can print on dark fabrics. You can do discharge ink, which some shops use, but I refuse to. Like, Plastisol is already like semi-toxic enough, but discharge inks, they come in different colors, and it's actually a discharge base that you mix pigments into, and you can print them on black, and they don't actually show up when you first print it, but then when you put them through the conveyor dryer and it heats it up, it actually pulls the dye molecules out of the fabric and like evaporates them. It's insane.
Who figures this stuff out?
I don't know, but the ink has formaldehyde in it.
Oh, wow.
And so they're like extremely toxic, and they off gas a bunch. Like, you need to have a direct vent like outside. Otherwise your shop will fill up with like acrid smoke. Like,
dude, that's crazy.
Yeah. So, but anyway, that's just a little bit of screen printing shirts 101.
Yeah. Interesting, man. Yeah. I'd love to come stop by sometime. Are you guys still off East Washington?
Yeah, so we have the 2 locations now. So we have the East Washington space, and that's where we have the artist studios, as well as the like kind of communal print shop, the fine art print shop. And then we have our 10th Street space, which is like 3125 East 10th. It's like off of Gray. It's like 2 blocks from my house. And so that's where we do all the commercial printing. So that has our whole like commercial printing set up. Just because it's like a completely different, you know, range of equipment. We needed a separate dark room and stuff. It wasn't something I could fit into the like communal shop.
Right.
Yeah.
So when you say you have studios there, are those like people have their own screen printing setups, or are those like any type of artist could have a studio space there?
Yeah. So at the Inglewood shop, we have 5 artist studios that are upstairs, and most of them are printmakers, but I think all of them are printmakers, but it's all like, you know, fine artists, you know, making their artwork. And some of them do screen printing. We have etching presses, so some of them do etching, lino cuts, you know, all sorts of different stuff. And, you know, we've had like painters in there before. So it's not, you know, we're not like, you have to be a printmaker. And then we also have like about 10 key holder members who they don't have a private studio, but they pay a monthly fee and they get 24/7 access. So those are like usually printmakers, because if you're going to have not your own private studio, your studio is the print shop. So they're usually, but I mean, if you were just making drawings, you could rent the space just to like use it, because we have big work tables and guillotines and supplies and, you know, stuff like that. So it's definitely doesn't have to be printmaking, but yeah, so a lot of the artists, they're just kind of doing their own artwork. And then in this middle space where we used to have the gallery, we shut down the gallery because of COVID. And then to like keep paying the rent, we decided to rent it out as studios. So we have 2 artists in those, and they're like completely mixed media. Like one of the artists in there, Cassie Woodworth, she does etchings. She does like what's the like that kind of like tapestry rug making, like not needlepoint. I can't remember I can't think of what the process is. But yeah, she's doing like fiber arts and stuff like that. And then we rent out the front of the building too, and that's actually 3 photographers. So it's like a photography studio because it had high ceilings, so they have their like scrim kind of like drop backgrounds and stuff like that. So yeah, it's a pretty like open space.
And all the spaces are rented out?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Nice. Congrats, man.
Thanks.
That probably takes some juggling and some balance, I'm sure. And that's probably something you didn't think that you would be doing when you started making art.
And it's like, it's pretty like that whole space is pretty self-sustaining for the most part. I think like, you know, people have their perceptions about how things are run and if I make money and stuff. And I'm like, that whole building nets about $200 a month. Like after we pay the rent, the internet,
it's a big space, man.
Yeah. The utilities. And then, you know, I try to provide as many supplies as we can. So we provide the, you know, ink, you know, emulsion, all sorts of other, you know, various supplies. So yeah, we don't, you know, it's not like I'm pocketing a couple $1,000 a month or something off of like studio fees. So it's kind of funny, but yeah, it kind of runs itself. So that's the way it should be.
That's cool, man. Well, it's been interesting getting to know some of your story, man, and some of your journey through academia and beyond.
For sure.
I think indie definitely benefits from people like you who are, you know, these DIYers that are like, you know what, you don't have to always do it the same way that it's always kind of been done. You can start something of your own and make it. I think that sort of energy indie definitely benefits from, and everyone collectively can, you know, elevate, you know, everybody together to what they're doing in a much better way. So that's awesome, totally. Man.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Yeah, it's definitely, that's kind of how I try to approach things. I'm just trying to, especially as a transplant, you know, I'm not from, you know, Indy. I consider myself a Hoosier now. You know, I've been here over 10 years, you know, but yeah, it's a great scene. And I wouldn't have like, you know, opened Cathead and would be doing what I'm doing if I didn't think there was like a benefit, you know, and I could help people. So yeah,
definitely, man. Yeah. I always wonder like why people end up here, even like my relatives and stuff.
I'm still not sure. I'm still not sure. When I applied to grad school here, I had not even like heard of Indianapolis.
What was your take?
Well, when I first came down here, I was actually, and it still does, but it reminded me of my hometown because Spokane is kind of the same size. Spokane, all of Eastern Washington, like everything east of the Cascades is red counties politically, except for Spokane is this like blue dot. And that's kind of indie.
Yeah.
And it was just like, it had the same feel. It's like, there's a lot of urban sprawl. There's like cool things happening. There was a great music scene, you know? So I don't know. But like, I honestly had like never even really heard of indie. I just like one of my professors at Western in Washington, he went to graduate school with Meredith Setzer, who's one of the print faculty. And then knew of Dave Morrison, who's the head of the print department there. And he was like, you should apply to Heron, you know? So that's how I heard about it.
And then 10 years of time go by.
Yeah. Like, you know, when I graduated grad school in 2013, I was like, for that first 2 years, I was doing everything I could to get out of indie. And then it just sort of grew on me. So I don't know what happened.
Indie's weird like that. It'll creep up on you.
You know, and, you know, now at this point, I'm just like, every place is the same. You know, we've got the same problems no matter where you go. So, yeah.
Yeah, I recently did a road trip from Indy all the way to Washington. We actually drove through Spokane. We went south to the Palouse, which was like really cool.
Totally.
And then we ended up in Aberdeen for a little while. And then eventually went up into BC and back across Canada towards Indy. And then I came down through the Dakotas. But man, it was cool driving out there. And I definitely kind of see what you mean. Like Idaho and Eastern Washington definitely it was weird. I felt sort of like at home there, but I've never been there before. It was kind of strange.
Right. It's a strange place. Did you see that Nirvana mural in Aberdeen? I worked on that.
Really? That's crazy.
Yeah. So my art professor that I was talking about at Grace Harbor College, he's the one that like spearheaded that. And so
that guy does everything.
Yeah. So it was him, and then it was me and two other of his former students. And I flew out to Washington. I was still in grad school. And we spent like 3 weeks in the top of an old decommissioned like factory building, painting this mural on these like panels with one-shot enamels and respirators.
Oh man,
I got sick like twice
just from
like the fumes and stuff, but it was fun. It was a blast.
That's crazy, man. Small world, man. Who would have thought?
Right? It's wild. He kept painting over my stuff though. I was the one that like designed and painted Dave Grohl and Chris Novoselic, and he kept like painting over them and like changing their faces. And by the time like we were done, I was like, they don't look like them anymore.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, but anyway, that's another podcast.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, Washington's a super interesting spot, man. I had a blast driving through there. I definitely was caught off guard with some of the desert areas. Like we drove through Yakima and I was just like, dude, I had no idea this was here.
Totally. Yeah, totally. It's like, yeah, once you get, especially outside of Spokane, because Spokane's still kind of in the foothills of like the Rockies, like in Montana and stuff like that. So it's a little less arid. But yeah, once you get like outside of Spokane, yeah, it's just, I mean, it's like,
I don't know how people live there, dude. It was so hot, man. It was crazy.
It's so hot. But it's a dry heat.
Nah, dude.
That was when I first moved to the Midwest, when we first moved to Chicago. I'd never experienced humidity. Like I was used to 100-degree days, but it was like desert, dry heat. You know, you could wear pants. And we moved to Chicago, and we moved in August, and it was, 92 degrees and 100% humidity. I was like,
and you're just like, what is this?
What did I do? What did we do?
Yeah, that's crazy,
wild.
Man.
Yeah.
Well, cool, man. This was fun. I definitely enjoyed getting to know more of your story. And, now I no longer have to think that the Cat Head Press dude is just like some guy from Washington who's doing all this cool stuff. I've got backstory now. So
that's awesome. Yeah, no, I'm glad we could finally make it happen. It's been kind of a back and forth trying to get this locked down. So,
word. Appreciate it, man.
Yeah,
I'll have to stop by sometime soon, and maybe next time Alex is in there or something, I'll tag along and
totally
check out what you guys got going on.
Yeah, just let me know. We'll make it happen.
Heck yeah, man. Well,
awesome.
I think we just cooked through about an hour or so. So
perfect.
Congrats, man. Good. This was fun.
Yeah.
We'll have to do another one and maybe talk. I don't know. We could maybe talk college and being a professor if you'd like, but I imagine we could talk about other things too.
Yeah. Pull like 2 or 3 different subjects from all of this stuff, and we'll do some different directed conversations until it be game. So
heck yeah, man. Well,
awesome.
Appreciate it. You have a good rest of your week, man.
Yeah, you too. Yeah, thanks a lot, dude.
Definitely, man.
Adios. All right, talk to you later. All right, bye-bye.